at least they're starting to maybe figure it out about some things. Like, for example, I don't know, the absolute, definitely not ironic scenario with a number of democratically elected and voted in governments that America has toppled and installed fascist dictators into for their own benefit, and now Russia's doing it to them, and like it's hard to feel bad. You know what I
And I
mean?
will say this: while the U.S. is certainly the biggest perpetrator on that front,
Not the only.
it is far from it's far from the only.
Listen,
Kingman Reef.
we take what we
Yeah.
can get, and at least they're getting there. But that moves us on to our second conflict that we're going to talk about today: Gaza and Israel. So in Canada,
I need more beer
doctors.
for this.
Yeah, go get it. In Canada, doctors who were, had served in Gaza call for an arms embargo sanctions on Israel. So there was testimony that was given in Canada and reported on, and it's all live, so you can go watch it if you want to. Because there's no journalists allowed in Gaza right now and not allowed at the West Bank, the best that they have is doctors who have come back and are reporting about what's going on and what it looks like there. And so it says, Canadian medical professionals who treated wounded Palestinians in the Gaza Strip are urging Ottawa to stop all military trade with Israel. The doctor said Wednesday Canada's current restrictions on arms exports to Israel aren't good enough, and they allege Canadian firms are still making military components being used in Gaza. Israel has insisted for months that its military operations in Gaza are meant to stop the threat posed by Hamas, but it has faced a wave of international condemnation over the high civilian death count and its restriction on aid, including food and medical supplies. So for anybody who doesn't know, also Canada, Britain, and France have threatened action if Israel does not stop military offensives and lift aid restrictions. And what happened in a matter of days... Yeah, finally. And what happened in a matter of days, Netanyahu got really mad, bitched and moaned about it, and pissed his pants. And then Canadian diplomats who were there getting a tour got shot at by Israeli forces. So things may or may not be escalating, and well, I guess we'll see.
Such a bitch.
I'm going to point out there
One
are
of the
very
sad-
few countries. I'm going to point out real quick. There are very few countries against which Israel has not openly committed acts that would cause a war if it were perpetrated by any other group. Let's not forget, as far as I know, the only U.S. warship to be sunk since World War II was sunk by the Israeli Defense Force.
Yeah. And one of the
Don't touch our
problems with
boats.
the way that the Israeli government operates in the Knesset is it's virtually impossible for a government to have a vote of no confidence in full, the way that they've designed things. So once the Israeli voters who are allowed to vote put in a government, it would really require another election to get that government out. And currently, the Netanyahu, in his attempt to try to stay out of jail, aligning with really extremists in his government, sort of compels him to favor extreme measures. And I'll have to say this to the state of Israel: you have burned through nearly all of your goodwill that came about over the years, and you should be very concerned that the Israeli public and the voting public should be very concerned about the reputation. Now, there is this notion of, well, every world against Israel, and Israel has to defend itself. We're talking more than that. We're simply talking about a very serious situation where it is less likely that the government of Israel can garner sympathy when terrible acts like what Hamas did to it in the invasion occur. It's harder and harder for politicians to justify supporting retaliation of those terrible terrorist attacks, and that's a bad thing.
One thing that you'll notice, for example, and you can see sort of the shift in what's been going on in the way the world operates, is you see France, Canada, and the UK operating together without America. Remember, America was the one who vetoed the ceasefire from the UN taking more aggressive actions, and
Mhm.
and was sort of almost standing in the way of a lot of these countries stepping forward like they are now, in a more taking at least a more aggressive stance, because people had to be playing nice with America, but because now America isn't playing nice with anybody else, they don't care to bother with them. Somebody asked Mark Carney, the current Prime Minister of Canada, about talking to the US and talking to specifically JD Vance, who was there when they made this announcement, and they were like, well, did you talk to JD Vance about this? Did you ask him anything? And he said, no, I just told him that this is what we were doing. He's like, I didn't give him all of the details, but I made him aware that this was what was going to happen. And so seeing these kinds of things not having the White House being at least consulted on is, at least I think, showing a shift.
But also, when's the last time the UN actually mattered in trying to stop a major conflict like that?
Sure.
That's a problem with the UN as well. It's a system where the UN becomes ineffectual other than people griping, complaining. And if you ever go to the UN and listen, you essentially hear a bunch of people complaining, and everyone ignoring them.
I think that the UN,
Israel itself was attacked by Hamas, and Hamas is using the Israeli response to justify its continued dictatorship over Gaza.
I have a little bit of a different opinion about that, because I think you're right, but I would also probably posit that Hamas got exactly what it wanted in its initial attack, is that Israel had already been problematic towards Israel for a long time, and vice versa, and what Hamas wanted was attention. And that's exactly what they got. Now, that hasn't been good necessarily for the people, and depending on by what metric you're talking about, but it did certainly get the world's attention.
And let's be fair. It's the government of Iran that supplied Hamas with the capability of the attack and celebrated when they did so.
Yeah.
It was a failure of the Israeli Defense Forces to foresee this. And I would suggest to the voters of Israel, hold Netanyahu in contempt for failing to do his job, not in this brutal war. And on the other hand, people in Gaza, you've got to stop supporting Hamas, because Hamas took over. They assassinated the Palestinian Authority. They've taken over dictatorship. They've made it impossible for people. So I would say, if I were a Gaza person, I would be also looking at grabbing Hamas leaders and pushing them aside, saying, here, take this dude, because the people in Gaza are victims of Hamas and Iran, Israel, and its supporters.
I think it's a little bit bold to ask the people of Gaza to do anything but survive right now. But that's just my opinion.
I agree.
I don't know. But I think Landon makes.
Say this.
Oh yeah, go ahead.
Oh, sorry. So let's say I'm going to turn these tables, right? The French resistance during World War II did things that could very justifiably be considered acts of terrorism.
Mm-hmm.
I think that right now, asking Palestinians to not support Hamas is like asking Jewish French people in hiding not to support the French resistance during World War II.
I fundamentally disagree with that comparison.
I mean, okay.
I'm going to move on to the next one. This is a more in-depth conversation for another day, because I think Landon has an interesting point that shows up where I think the people who have the most say in about what's going on right now is the Israeli people. Opposition to Gaza,
almost all to say.
Right. Opposition to Gaza war grows among Israeli soldiers as strikes ramp up. This is the shit you're really not going to hear about. Barely noticeable, only a few months ago, opposition is growing about fresh Israeli operations in Gaza, even among the country's military reservists, some of whom have publicly called out the government for what they say is an immoral and politically motivated decision to continue the war. Quote, I refuse... Oh, why are you doing that? I refuse to commit war crimes. Quote, the patriotic thing to do is to say no. Quote, as an Israeli, as a human being, I am calling on the Israeli government to stop starving 2 million people, he said, adding that he felt shame and guilt because, quote, people inside Gaza are starving to death.
They are. They are. It's a
They're
very, very
also,
serious
yeah,
situation. I also call on the countries to hold the government in Iran responsible for starting this. And so you're talking about bringing
if I'm not
leaders to
wrong,
consequence. The Iranian leaders and their religious nutcases need to be brought to justice, in my opinion.
yeah. Israel has also been blockading aid, especially food, to Gaza, which is, in my opinion, is a war crime to stop, food from reaching people. That's absolutely unacceptable. And I think so that might be one of the reasons why the Israeli soldiers are now feeling that twinge on their conscience that, people are not getting food and medical supplies that they should have a right to, in my opinion. It should be criminal to not allow food to
It
go in
is.
there.
It is.
Oh, yeah.
I would ask the people in Israel that are allowed to vote, because that's not people in Israel, people that don't vote, to when the election comes in, hold Netanyahu accountable for failing to anticipate the Hamas attack and for the way he's prosecuted the war. And this is a very thing. I understand that Hamas is an evil organization put up by the really bad people of the government of Iran that has done terrible things to Israel, but don't let that excuse dissuade you from holding the Israeli government accountable. And if you can kick out the current nutcases in the Knesset, you can bring Netanyahu to justice, because he, like the taxi cab driver in Moscow, needs to be brought to justice and held accountable for his war crimes. It doesn't matter that Hamas has done it. This is not an equivalent thing.
Right.
It is holding them responsible. So the leader of Hamas, if he's still alive or she's still alive, and the leader of the Israeli government that is perpetrating this thing, and the religious leaders of Iran need to be brought to justice, in my opinion. And the other thing, of course, is I wish the Middle East wasn't so important. I wish it'd be treated like some sideshow, and that the world can focus on anything else. I'm tired of the Middle East becoming this thing that occupies the mindset of the world. We have a lot of other problems going on in the stage that we are not paying attention to.
Stop doing proxy wars.
What's happening in Sudan, what's happening in Niger. There are big problems, and unfortunately the Middle East seems to have a disproportionate mind share in the press.
One last thing to jump to for this one, and it is specifically that Israel warns Europe that Palestine recognition may be met with West Bank annexation.
Oh.
Yeah, fucking who, dude? Like I said, Netanyahu pissed his pants because France and fucking Canada and fucking the UK told him to fucking cut it out. Israeli government ministers have reportedly warned key European countries that any unilateral recognition of a Palestine state could prompt Israel to take unilateral measures as well, potentially including the annexation of parts of the West Bank, according to Monday's report. Strategic Affairs Minister Ron Dermer personally warned French Foreign Minister Jean-Noël Barrot, I don't know if I'm pronouncing it right, and British Foreign Secretary David Lammy that Israel could respond to recognition of a Palestine state by annexing Area C of the West Bank and legalizing unauthorized outposts. And that they reported, citing the foreign diplomat, familiar with the matter.
The sad thing is that much of the West Bank is under Israeli control and authority, and that the situation in the West Bank, while it's not as bad as Gaza, is still under attack, because there are people that Palestinian Authority is trying to stop that are attacking Israel and Israel attacking them, and settlers and right wing stuff. It's a terrible situation.
What that is exactly why you don't negotiate with terrorists.
With terrorists.
Don't do it.
Yes. Yeah, don't do it. Don't do it. And I think, the case again for this situation is this threat about, if you do this, we're going to invade. Well, hey, Emperor Winnie
Hey there.
the government of Taiwan should be recognized. Countries should go to Taiwan and say, let's set up an embassy and recognize Taiwan as an independent country, because the Chinese Communist Party has never, ever, ever run Taiwan. Taiwan has been an independent country forever, and guess what? It's not part of China. There's one China policy. It's in China, not in Taiwan. So tell Emperor Winnie go F himself. If you're going to be consistent, do that to Taiwan as well as the West Bank.